It's the Football Card Strategy Show. And those of you who are familiar with this channel know what that means. It's a very exciting time. We have Andy Cason from Football Card Quest at FF Card Quest, Football Card Quest on YouTube. He is the man, the only man that I trust when it comes to football cards. I'm Paul Hickey with NoOffSeason.com. He's Andy Cason. What's up, Andy? How you doing, man?
I'm doing great. Yeah, 100% dedicated to football cards, diehard to pretty extreme level. And so this is like my favorite time of the year, one of my favorite times of the year, because we're coming off the NFL draft, and while a lot of people are following like the NBA Finals and Major League Baseball, I am loading up on all my favorite guys that I feel are undervalued and getting ready for the 2023 season.
Yes, so that's what this show is going to be about. It's going to be about it's football card buying season. Who are we buying? And helping the audience prepare their inventory to make money this upcoming football season. But before we get to that, let's get to a couple housekeeping matters here. First of all, I want to tell everybody about Graybo's Card Shop in Richmond, Virginia. If you're not familiar with the show, and you're a new listener, then let me tell you about Graybo's. You can go to graybos.co and use the code STRATEGY2023 and get 10% off. And they've got some great stuff. They're in Richmond, Virginia. Check them out in person if you're around the area at all, and tell them that Paul Hickey from the Sports Card Strategy Show sent you. And we would love to see you also at the National. We just got breaking news from Andy Cason that he and his co-host Carter the Power on the FF Card Quest pod, you guys are going to be at the National. Tell me about that. What's your plan?
Well, my plan specifically is to obviously create some content, but I really want to target these skill position guys. I'm hoping that there are a lot of dealers and other hobbyists there that just undervalue a lot of skill position players that I can buy in low on them and potentially, get a really good cash deal on those guys to flip them in, the upcoming season.
So Andy's going to be creating content with Carter. They're going to be in and around all of the cases and the dollar boxes and the value boxes, I'm sure, doing their thing, which is going to be amazing. But before we get into that and who you're going to be targeting, Andy, and who you are targeting now during football card buying season, let's talk about the fact that I'm going to need you to stop by booth 3216. If you're not familiar, the Sports Card Strategy Show will be set up at booth 3216. We're going to be creating content, and you and Carter are both going to need to stop by and record some podcast content with us. So you're going to need to bring your plays by, do a little show and tell in person, Sports Card Strategy show and tell in person, and that'll be fun. So meet up with all the listeners. I'm sure you're going to be recognized by your Football Card Quest listeners and Sports Card Strategy Show listeners. So, all right, we're going to get into it here. Enough admin notes. Oh, my shoes is pumped about Andy being in the house. Evan Bell, good to see you. Chad Gill in the house. Chad is a resident audience member turned analyst, and he's got some good stuff at nooffseason.com that we'll talk about in this show. Shoes is dropping some names already, so we'll get to that. We'll get to that, Shoes. But let's let Andy kick us off here. So Andy, football card buying season. Tell us about how you are stocking up on your inventory, and then we'll go from there. What do you got going on, man?
So when it comes to, first and foremost, let's talk about the quarterbacks real quick, because a lot of what I've seen over the past few years in terms of quarterback success and quarterback rookie card prices going up at the beginning of the season is really closely tied to wins, Paul. So what I'm doing is I'm looking at the first I've got the first 4 weeks of schedule that I've looked at, and I've gone through every matchup and said, okay, how confident do I feel that this team is going to win? There's some teams that I think that everybody should absolutely avoid. And then from there, I can then say, okay, these teams that I'm iffy on, and then there's teams that I'm very confident on that can start out 2-1, 3-1, possibly 3-0. Those are the guys that I first and foremost want to target. And then I basically look and say, okay, how young are they? How much can they drive like a fear of missing out? And then how much draft capital is spent on them? So when you take out like their age and their draft capital, and you turn that into a number, you can actually create like a score. So what I've done is I've created more or less a hype index for these players. And then based on their prior, some of the guys, like the guys just coming out of the draft, are going to be crazy hyped up. Anthony Richardson, CJ Stroud, and Bryce Young. So those guys are they're in a different situation because of the cards that are available for them and the cards that are coming out over the next month. But that's where I start for quarterbacks. Skill position players is a little bit different because even if their team doesn't win in the beginning of the season, they could just go out and flat out ball out and put up these monster performances, big highlights, whether it's running back, wide receiver, and their prices could go up just based on that, just based on that performance alone, just way exceeding what their expectations were coming into the season. Because as you know, some of these skill position players can go from like a $5 rookie auto, even serial number in some cases, $10, $15, up to the respectable $40, $50 range. And that's, I think, a sweet spot for a lot of guys. Or you could make some bigger plays and invest a little bit bigger dollars on some of these quarterbacks, but it's very contingent upon them leading their team to wins.
Yeah, I love that overview because my football card strategy is to basically acquire now, and we'll talk about who in a minute, but acquire now and then list in August. And you and Carter were kind of the ones on your show that solidified that strategy for me last year, where it just made sense with the NFL hype cycle. But as it relates to your hype index, which I'm a huge fan of, and can you monetize even more if you get those things right in September? Like, so in other words, like, is my strategy safe, but maybe there's higher upside if people were to use your hype index, hold maybe a few weeks longer until that 3-0 start or that 2-1 start? And if so, is there risk involved if that doesn't happen? Like, maybe in your experience, break that down for us.
Yeah, I think in certain situations there is risk involved, right? As you look at Aaron Rodgers going to the Jets, obviously he's got a lot of new fans with the Jets. They're one of the largest media markets. I think he's a great example because of his current age, of where he's at. He's on the tail end of his career, but yes, he's a Hall of Famer. But when you look at what his card values have really done, a lot of people still say they're undervalued. But if he doesn't get off to a hot start with the Jets, his prices are definitely going to dip. And his whole time with the Jets this year is pretty much Super Bowl or bust. He's got to make a deep run in the playoffs, get to a Super Bowl if we really want to see those changes in his card value. So he's one guy that you could look at selling before the season starts, because they have a very difficult schedule to start the season. And with the new team and gelling with the new team and everything, it could be a little slow, just like when Tom Brady came to the Bucs. It was slow to start, and his card prices actually dipped because there was a lot of critics and a lot of people saying, nah, this guy's washed. It's not going to work out with the new team, only for him to take off and go on to win a Super Bowl. So that's definitely something to watch out for, because the older a player is, and pretty much like they're going to have to do a lot more. So like Geno Smith is another prime example. He's going to have hype coming into the season. So the speculation and the anticipation of how he finished last year and him picking up, and now they add Jackson Smith-Njigba, and the offense got a little bit better. So there's going to be more hype heading into the season compared to how difficult their schedule is to start off. If he doesn't go 3-0, his prices are going to dip. He's going to be very susceptible, just like Rodgers and some of these other guys, to dipping into November. Now, if they make a playoff run, you could hold through that dip and the prices could appreciate back up. And if they make a deep playoff run, now all of a sudden you're starting to see that demand increase, those prices increase again. But if you want to go ahead and realize profit, I don't blame you, especially if you got multiple cards. Maybe it's not something super rare. You've got people that are sending you offers, and it's hard to turn down some good profit.
Yeah, we talk about being like as laser focused as possible and as narrow, like narrowing down your strategy and your focus. So like not spreading yourself too thin. And I feel like the examples you gave are great. And I also think about like Patrick Mahomes a couple years ago, like the same thing happened with him where it's like with maybe guys like Brady, Mahomes, and Rodgers this year. If they don't exceed those expectations, like there's high expectations, and if they don't meet them, then their prices are going to drop. And even if they do sort of meet them, a lot of prices are baked in. And so they have to exceed them in order to realize a profit. So I like what you're saying about considering those guys with some risk and maybe getting rid of guys like Rodgers, Geno Smith, or earlier, like maybe during the hype cycle in August. And as it relates to narrowing your focus, I'm looking at guys like Burrow, Hurts, and Trevor Lawrence, and I'm buying them in bulk. Like I'm continuing to buy those guys and get their cards graded, and we can break that down later in the show. But would a strategy there be to liquidate a bunch of them during August to kind of offset some risk, but then maybe since if you have so many of them, hold them back because those are three young guys that have a hopefully a long career ahead of them with maybe some hype spikes based on performance?
Yeah, it's kind of like that with Patrick Mahomes too. It's like you hold those cards a lot closer to your vest because you look at their lifetime value, and these guys are just entering their prime. They're entering their prime. Even Burrow, he's entered his prime so young, and Herbert and Hurts too. So it's like, man, these guys are going to be such a face of the league for such a long time. I'm not really hard pressed to sell them. I could take a little bit more of a risk and list my cards maybe a little bit higher, or just not feel so compelled to sell it unless I really want to liquidate the card and put some cash back in my pocket, because those are the best guys to own. Like, when you talk about selling cards, those are the most liquid guys. You're not going to really ever have a hard time getting out of a good Hurts, Burrow, Herbert, Mahomes. Those are my top guys to own on the hype index heading into this season, but they're also the top guys to own in dynasty fantasy football, where you're stuck with that player until you cut or trade them. So it's kind of like the same thought. Like, you really should not be hard pressed at all. In a lot of cases, you should be holding these guys and only taking a very nice premium for your good stock in these players.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a couple different categories that we're kind of getting at here. You've got your guys that are probably got some stuff built in, and if you're holding them, they would have kind of a higher risk factor because of the expectations, and don't necessarily project as long-term holds, like your Aaron Rodgers, and Andy mentioned Geno Smith as an example. And then you've got this other category where you've got Burrow, Herbert, Hurts, Trevor Lawrence. And I want to get to Tua in a second, because Chad Gill wrote a great article on how to make hundreds of dollars buying Tua cards right now at nooffseason.com. But we know, okay, so for everybody who doesn't know, if you go to patreon.com/football cards, that's Andy's premium content, basically. And my assumption is that his hype index is in full effect there that he's talking about. So you probably can get all of this hype index where he's talking. And just to clarify what that is, this is basically like a list of guys that Andy's has a formula for, that he's ranked, that he's saying in all likelihood could go have the best chance to have their teams, if they're a quarterback, have their teams start with a winning record or sort of start hot. Like our boy in Carolina did, who's now out in San Francisco, a couple years ago, right? Why can't I think of his name?
Sam Darnold.
Yeah, Darnold.
Yeah.
Sam Darnold. Like he started 4-0, and then now his cards are worth pennies. So anyway, you might have some sleepers in there like that in Andy's hype index, but then you've got other guys that are more well known, maybe more likely to do it. But it's based on his analysis of the schedule, his analysis of draft capital, and all of that stuff. So check out patreon.com/football cards to get that. But Andy, can you give us a preview, give the listeners a preview of maybe, give us a little taste of who you've got in there, so that they can get a feel for maybe some of the other names.
Yeah, so like I said, yeah, you're right. I've got a team score built in there for each player, the age score, the Hall of Fame score, their dynasty score, and then I aggregate those to give them basically a hype index score. And what that tells me is like how easy it is going to be to move these players, how easy it is going to be to sell these players. So obviously, if you're buying Patrick Mahomes, you're paying a premium, but he's the most liquid player in the NFL right now. So it's going to be so easy if you wanted to get out of that card, you wanted to sell them, you're going to have a lot of people knocking on your door trying to buy it, right? So it's a very safe, very liquid in investment, even if you are paying a premium. So like basically what you can do is you could look at the guys on my hype index list and try and find a card that they have in common. Now it's challenging, right? With sometimes you have to do it with the guys in the same draft class. Like if you're looking at Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, and Anthony Richardson, you've got to look at their Bowman U, autograph with the little first logo on the top right. And you can't do that with Mahomes, Burrow, Hurts, Josh Allen. So in a lot of cases, you do have to compare guys in the same draft class. But I think Jalen Hurts is a great example. Like Tua, you said, I think Tua is a very interesting. He's just outside. Like if I look at Tua, he is on my list as, let's see, Tua is on here as my number 21. 21 out of 56. I'm tracking 56 quarterbacks. He is 21 of 56. I think Tua just comes with a higher risk. I mean, I think the reward is high. I think that the offense is super dynamic. The defense should be better, a lot better this year. And so this is a real contender of a team. And if Tua does not have health concerns, right? I mean, if he doesn't get another concussion, he's not forced to retire because of, brain injury concerns, then I think he's got a ton of upside if you compare his prices to Hurts, Burrow, and Herbert in that team environment, in that offensive scenario. So yeah, he's a guy that can obviously go out and way exceed expectations compared to where he's currently at. I think Daniel Jones is another one. I know we've talked about him before, but I mean, this team is clearly ascending. They may be in a really tough division, but Giants fan base is massive. Have Daniel Jones in a contract extension. So, I mean, Daniel Jones is another guy that I believe is undervalued right now that has a lot of potential for growth. And then I really like the start to the season this year for Sam Howell on the Washington Commanders. With as young as he is, with new ownership for the Commanders, they start out against the Cardinals at home. It's like a tee-up, layup start to the season, easy 1-0 start. And he's a guy that, has all this new product out too. So you get some new product hype in there. You get the rookie element because he's really getting his NFL debut. And so he was a massive winner to the draft. The Commanders released Carson Wentz. They don't pick up anybody else. So he's their clear starter going forward. And so there's definitely a narrative and a pathway for him. Same thing with Desmond Ridder. I mean, with them spending the number 8 overall pick on Bijan Robinson, I think the Falcons defense is underrated heading into this season. And I think they could, because they have such a strong run game and a strong defense, that they could actually control some of these games, and Desmond Ridder may not have to do so much. He could just be part of like a really good team environment to where they start off 2-0, 3-0 type of start. If you look at their starting schedule, it's really not that distant. It's a couple divisional matchups, so it's interesting, but there's a pathway there for him to go out, currently ranked number 20th on my hype index, to go out and exceed some of these expectations. Because I'll tell you what, man, look at Trey Lance. I got Trey Lance at number 14. And this is all because of him being on the 49ers and him still being so young and having early first-round draft capital. If he didn't have that and he wasn't on the 49ers, his dynasty value, his lifetime value, which is based on his prior production and efficiency metrics and what we expect him to do, has tanked since last year. So the only thing buoying Trey Lance's values right now are the fact that he's, still just like 23 years old, and he's got early first round draft capital behind him, and he's on the 49ers still.
Yeah. And didn't the 49ers trade up for him as well? So it's like there's even more draft capital than your typical draft capital invested in him. And I know people love Brock Purdy and stuff, but Jimmy Garoppolo's in Vegas now, and so there's not as much competition for him. And Brock Purdy's coming off surgery, so I like that you mentioned Trey Lance. Shout out to Ryan Fitz at Graybo's Card Shop, who I met at Mint Collective. He's one of the owners. He loves Desmond Ridder. That's like he just decided that Desmond Ridder was going to be his sleeper pick, and then he was a little worried about that, but Andy Cason dropping the Desmond Ridder unprompted should make Ryan Fitz feel really good about his call. That's an interesting one. So love when I can ask Andy a question and then he just drops the knowledge. So great analysis on the quarterbacks. If there's anyone else, feel free to drop them, Andy. But is it time to move to the skill position players? Because you're one of the people that one of the only people that I trust when it comes to projecting skill position players. And so let me preface that with this. I think that with all of these players that you've named and all of these players that you're about to name, I like the idea of buying football cards now and loading up on your inventory, not just because the prices in theory will be lower than they will be in August. Obviously, that's a main reason, but also because I think that you need to have the mindset generally, if you're listening to this, of listing to sell in August, because the longer that I've done this, the more convinced I've become that by doing that, you actually give yourself two markets. And let me kind of explain what I mean. Like in the football card market, you're always going to have the people that want to buy people that they think are going to win the Super Bowl or that they think are going to overachieve during the season. I think that's the point. But that's the hardest thing to do. And I think that's what everybody's trying to do. But by buying now and listing to sell in August and just having that mindset and just saying like, I'm going to list everything in August, maybe hold back one or two cards of that, in the event that you can make the right call, you're actually doubling your market because you're leaving meat on the bone for people. So people are going to not be as astute as all of us, and they're going to buy a bunch of football cards in August, right? So a lot of people are going to buy in August thinking that they can predict who's going to do well during the season, because that's when all the preseason hype and rankings and training camp and preseason, that's when everyone's getting pumped about fantasy football. That's when everyone is placing their bets in Vegas. That's when everyone thinks that they can make the right call. So if you take advantage of that buying season, you're leaving meat on the bone for people. But if you're just holding throughout the entire season, you're really limiting yourself to the people that will buy when the event happens. But if you can double your market by selling to the people that are buying earlier than the event happening, and then selling to the people who buy when the event happens. That's what I mean by doubling your market. So with all of that said, is it time to get into some skill position players? And how do you treat skill position players? Do you treat them where you're a little bit more cautious and then you're holding for the event? Or do you treat them kind of like my overall strategy where you're like, hey, let's sell during the football hype spike in August?
Yeah. I love that that comment, Paul, because you're absolutely right. There is a person that thinks that every single team is going to go out. There's a person for each team that thinks that they're going to go out and exceed expectations and get off to this hot start and potentially make a playoff run. I mean, there is no team in the NFL that, besides maybe the Cardinals, that people are going to be just thinking that they're gonna fail. Let's start the season. There's fans and collectors and enthusiasts for every single team heading into the season. Then when the season starts, everything is thrown up in the air, and then you see where the cards fall and everything gets recalibrated. So You're 100% right. Your market is so much bigger heading into the season than it is once the season actually starts and unfolds.
Yeah. I'm glad you agree, because I feel like sometimes these concepts, I don't articulate them well, but because you agree with that off the bat, I think that's something that I want the audience to really take away. And Shoes says, other than Sports Card Strategy Show, Football Card Quest is where he got his info early on getting back into the hobby. He wants to thank Andy for that. Let's say happy Friday to Greeny Green in the house. He's a loyal audience member. And Rocky Empire Sports Cards, good morning to you as well. So, all right, Andy. So Shoes said T. Higgins, Geno Smith, Joe Burrow. I don't know Jalen Williams. I don't know if I'm missing that, or if Shoes is talking about Jameson Williams from the Lions, because he's an interesting name to talk about. Josh Allen and Justin Jefferson. These are all in the different categories that we've talked about. So Geno, Burrow, and Allen are obviously in a category of quarterbacks, but Burrow and Allen are in a different situation than Geno. And maybe you can break that down for everybody. And then after you do that, let's talk about, I think all three of these guys, I think he's talking about Jameson Williams. So then you've got the wideouts, Justin Jefferson, T. Higgins, and Jameson Williams. To me, they're clearly in three different tiers as well, but I'll let you comment on both of those, and then I'll add my thoughts.
Yeah, the 100% in different tiers. Justin Jefferson.
It's Jalen Waddle.
Jalen Waddle. Okay. You could actually argue that Jalen Waddle's a little bit undervalued right now. If you look at where he goes on average in fantasy drafts, he goes several rounds, like 2 rounds later than Tyreek Hill. And there's that whole 1A, 1B. It's kind of the same thing with T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, right? But with Justin Jefferson, I mean, he is the man. I do think that Jordan Addison, the guy they drafted at the end of the first round, he's going to be fantastic. He's going to have probably the best rookie wide receiver season out of all the rookie wide receivers. But there is no real compared. Like, Justin Jefferson is hands down the best wide receiver in the league. If you combine like how young he is with how high his potential ceiling is, with how good his route running and how good he is at the point of catch. And he even added to the impeccable catch, highlight list last year with that crazy catch that he made with 2 defenders draped on him. And
insane.
So he's a perfect example of skill position players in some cases being more valuable than quarterbacks. There's no way that Kirk Cousins rookie cards are ever going to be as valuable as Justin Jefferson's. There's just not enough unless he gets to a Super Bowl and wins a Super Bowl that he can get or exceed the same values, generally speaking, as Justin Jefferson. Of course, Justin Jefferson's got a lot more rookie cards being from the 2020 class, but if you were to compare like for like and find something that was very similar in scarcity, there's just Justin Jefferson's going to win. He's going to win that rookie card value battle every time in both demand and general resale value. So he's at the top. He's the cream of the crop. He's the wide receiver 1. He's going to be the most liquid, in demand wide receiver you've got. I mean, I've got an optic hollow Justin Jefferson, which is not an incredibly rare card, but for Justin Jefferson, it's a good card. It's a card that I've got listed for close to $100, Paul. $100 for an optic hollow, where now Jonathan Taylor's optic hollows, who was the RB1 a couple years ago, his optic hollow, you can get that card for less than $20. You can get that card for less than $20, whereas I get offers on this Justin Jefferson all the time around 50, 60, and I'm just like, I'm not hard pressed to sell it because his lifetime value is so high. So he is really in a tier of his own, kind of with Jamar Chase. But Justin Jefferson's even ahead of Jamar Chase.
Yeah. I mean, I'll put it to you like this too. I've removed Jalen Waddle from our football card rankings just because I want everybody to narrow their focus. So Andy's here to kind of check me on this and talk about some sleeper plays maybe that I don't have. Because I think with football cards, there's going to be some sleeper plays. But I'm of the mindset that you go top tier quarterbacks, you buy them right now. And I would say, like, these aren't tiered off. Obviously, like, if they were, I think it would stop at Mahomes and then it would be kind of everybody else. But got Burrow, Hurts, Trevor, Mahomes, Dak, Tua, Herbert, Fields, Lamar, Josh Allen. Then you've got Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase. So I think actually like those are the names that I would cut off there in terms of like who I would buy in the audience. That's just me. I'm not as in-depth as Andy is. That's why he's here, because he's going to talk a little bit about even like you heard him mention a minute ago, ADP and fantasy drafts, right? Like he uses that to understand who's undervalued and what might be a play in cards, which is amazing. But then we've got, like another tier of, now we get into some sleepers where we've got like sleeper quarterbacks, Caleb Williams, Geno Smith, Trey Lance, Anthony Richardson, Bryce Young, CJ Stroud. Then we get into more skill position players. I don't have Waddle in my rankings at all, just because I don't see Waddle as a guy. Like I would put money into it. If I'm going to invest in wide receivers, I'm going to put the Waddle money into Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase. I think Waddle is too much of a guy where he's got too much Tyreek Hill to deal with. And then there's too much downside. Even I know Andy might feel differently, and he might feel differently about T Higgins, but I think T Higgins has the same problem Jalen Waddle does. And that's why I removed T Higgins from these rankings, because I don't want people buying T Higgins. I'd rather have them buy Jamar Chase or Joe Burrow. Like take your T Higgins money right now and put it into Joe Burrow. Now you're in a situation where I think you're a little bit more solid for the season and for the long term. So there's just too much there. So that's my answer to Shoes' question. As far as, I think Josh Allen is also a safe bet. I'm just not as into him, but I think if you can find a Josh Allen rookie card that you can make money on in terms of grading it, cracking and resubmitting, or just buying a PSA 10 that's down and then flipping it in August, I think that's probably also a good play. But that's my take. And I know some of these guys are a little bit more risky than others, right? Like I think Justin Fields, Tua, those guys carry probably a higher risk element than probably Herbert and Allen. But I don't know, Andy, that's my take on Shoes' question and everything that we've been talking about so far.
Yeah, I will say that what I will say is so you have guys like I think a couple players that I would sell heading into the season, before the season, quarterbacks, Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, Anthony Richardson. If you bought any of their Bowman Chrome U cards, if you're buying them now, sell them before the season starts. You've got a combination of new products coming out for these guys. And when the season starts, pro uniform cards start coming out, whether it's the Donruss Elite or the Panini Legacy, or we'll see how the release schedule shakes out. They're getting ready to release the Chronicles draft picks in the middle of June. But I think it's imperative that you sell these cards. And it's not just that these other cards are coming out. It's also just the research behind rookie quarterbacks underwhelming. There's just very few and far in between rookie quarterbacks going out and actually exceeding expectations. And it's each one of these guys has got an uphill battle. Each one of these guys have a difficult schedule to start the season, and they're going to have struggles. They're not going to exceed. This is, at least in my opinion and my expectations of what will actually happen, is that they're not going to exceed expectations compared to what their college uniform cards are selling for now and heading into the season. And then those prices will just really drop a lot. And then you have pro uniform cards that are out. And of course, people are going to pay a premium for stuff that just gets released. There's that new product release hype, and it's scarce right out of the gate. So you've got crazy price on that. So those are three guys that I would absolutely sell heading into the season, with the intent to say, okay, in November, in the following May, June, now I'm gonna, when their cards are actually out, you have a lot of their sets out, then you can find those deals and those variances in the card values and target specific auctions. But man, I got to sell those college uniform cards heading into the season.
I could not agree with you more. I think specifically Anthony Richardson, Bryce Young, CJ Stroud. those would be the three guys that I would definitely offload. Even taking my concept that I dropped a minute ago, even a step further, right? You have to look at guys like Richardson, and I'll throw Young and Stroud in there too, but especially Richardson. And I'll explain why in a second. As a guy that you might need to sell, like when the rookie mini camp happened, like the minute that he's on ESPN in a Colts uniform, in early, like, maybe the rookie mini camp have already passed, but like if they have early training camp sell of an Anthony Richardson, like when he's, because you've said this before, I've heard you and Carter talk about this on your show. There'll be an Instagram reel from a practice where Richardson it'll be like because he's a highlight machine, but he's going to struggle. Like he just is. There's no way around it. And same with the other two. Like, and the other two might not be as highlight machine as Richardson, but we all saw him in his pro day workouts and things like that. Like he's going to have those moments in a practice that means nothing, where there's no pads on, and he's going to be in a Colts practice uniform and people are going to freak out. I think that's when you sell Richardson, because then again, you're widening your Richardson market. You're giving people who want to buy him to flip him in August. Now you're involving those people. You're leaving some meat on the bone for them. And if you flip him in August, I don't think you're going wrong there either, because then I think you're getting all the people who are super hype about the season and what he might be able to do. Now, I think Gardner Minshew could be a potential huge super sleeper, as a potential way to make some money in the short term in that same Indianapolis Colts situation. But on the same token, I think you have to hedge that with, if Anthony Richardson does get, because you remember when Mac Jones was named the starter in August a couple years ago, heading into his rookie season. I think he was named the starter in like early August, if I'm not mistaken, or early preseason.
Yeah,
His
over Cam
cards
Newton
went nuts. Oh yeah, over Cam Newton. His cards went nuts. And then they went even more nuts when he actually played well during his rookie season. But if you could go back and you could say, look, that was an anomaly. Like I think Mac Jones, if you take all the rookie quarterbacks, high drafted rookie quarterbacks, I think the Mac Jones performance spike, when it wasn't even really that great of an on-field performance, was such an anomaly that when you really need to sell the rookie quarterback is if and when they're named the starter. So if for some reason, so I would watch Gardner Minshew. I would almost, if you're like Andy and you want to kind of go a little bit deeper into football cards, my advice would be stay narrow on this, but maybe buy some Gardner Minshew cards and hedge that with some Anthony Richardson. And then you've got a situation where one of them is going to be the starter. So as soon as they name the starter and that person is starting the game or going into that week, sell that person's cards. So if it's Minshew, sell him first. And then when Richardson gets the job, maybe in like week 5, 6, 7, maybe that's another opportunity to sell your Richardson cards. But that would be the longest I would hold. And then with Young and Stroud, I think you're kind of SOL there. You got like, they're going to be the starter, right? So you got to kind of get rid of them.
I think Anthony Richardson's going to start the season as well, though. It just goes back to Shane Steichen, coming from the Eagles as their offensive coordinator. He is fully prepared to build around a Jalen Hurts style offense, and he's gone on record saying that the best way for a quarterback to build experience in the NFL is through actual game time play. So he is preparing to give Anthony Richardson on the job training. I think that he's going to develop him, and he's going to build a rushing game around him, and he's going to start week 1 out of the gate. And the only reason why I say this is because of the new coaching regime in Shane Steichen. He's fully confident and feels very good about building a rushing attack first around Anthony Richardson, and like having that as his starting base, and then sprinkling in pass plays from there. So that's why I think AR is going to start the season for the Colts. I do expect that to happen. So to your point, when that is officially announced, like heading into preseason, man, his cards values are going to go up even more. If you look at them now, I mean, they're a premium, but I do think they'll probably go up even more when that's officially announced, because there is some ambiguity there. But I think I think a lot of people anticipate him at least starting by, a few weeks in, but I think he'll start. I think there's a really good possibility he starts the season.
Okay, so here's the thing, guys. Like, Kendall and I talk about, like, and Chad, we've talked about the concept of just making money off of one play. And I've never been more adamant about this than I am right now. Like, based on what Andy just said, my mind goes to, if you want to make money in football cards, one thing you could do, and this could be the only thing, is you could buy Anthony Richardson's Bowman Chrome U autos. Now, they're not cheap, but you could buy them now and then hold, say, 5 or 6 of them until when he is officially announced the starter, sell them all right then. And to me, that you should profit from a move like that, especially if and doing it now gives you the opportunity also to get him graded at PSA. So it's a little bit risky, but I think if you go deep into that, that's actually a pretty darn good play. So anyway, Andy, let's get to one more skill position player, because Greeny Green's asking about Dameon Pierce. And then we've got some questions in the chat about individual defensive players. I use that term from fantasy football, but defensive players. So Dameon Pierce, Greeny Green says, what do you think?
Yeah, Dameon Pierce is going to be purely a performance-based play. I'm if I'm making a play on Dameon Pierce, I'm expecting him to go out and exceed expectations in a performance-based situation. So, currently he's going about, running back 15 to 20. Yeah, he does have potential to be a top 10 running back. I'm not sure that's actually gonna happen. It'll be interesting to see what type of offense, under the new DeMeco Ryan regime, how that rolls out. But obviously he's their RB1. I don't anticipate him getting the same type of workload that he did last year with them adding Devin Singletary to the backfield. So I'm looking at Dameon Pierce as a solid, like, mid-tier RB. If I'm buying him to try and flip at the beginning of the season, to be honest with you, I think it's got to have a lot of personal collection value to me. I don't see him, because of how he started his rookie season. He's going to have to kind of show that same flash, that same level of brilliance. And the Texans, just with new coaching, rookie quarterback, it's going to be tough, man. I just don't. They get the Ravens in week 1. They go to the Ravens, and then they have the Colts in week 2 at home, and then they go to the Jaguars. So I'm looking at them at like a 1-2 start at best. And I just don't think that Dameon Pierce is going to get more than a 50 to 60% top, type of carry share in that offense. Yeah. And he's going to be splitting receiving work. I just don't see that pathway to elite upside with the current running back market, the way it looks. So, and then of course you've got a struggling Texans team to put together a winning record and trying to make the playoffs in the AFC South, where the Jags are probably going to dominate that division. I don't see it happening for Dameon Pierce or really the Texans at all this year. So I think there's got to be a lot of personal collection value, because I think that Dameon Pierce values in November are going to be fantastic, and you'll be able to buy.
Yeah, there you go. So don't forget that November and even December is like a really great pocket of buying football cards. So as you're putting together your 6 to 8 month football card strategy right now in May, don't forget what Andy just said, where there is a pocket to buy, buy back in. So if you're selling in August, that doesn't mean that you're out of football cards for the season. I mean, you can definitely buy back in with some of your profits in November and December. But yeah, like Dameon Pierce, to me, that's forcing the formula. Like that's a stretch. And I like that Greeny Green asked it, because, we're looking for super sleepers. I think there's some of them out there. Andy shot down my Gardner Minshew, which is totally cool. I'm glad he did, because we need to weed out guys. I think weeding out guys is just as important as targeting guys. And so weeding out a guy like Dameon Pierce, I think, is key, because the formula is, picking a guy that obviously a good deal on a great card. So that could come at a card show. That could, we don't want to rule out like that kind of strategy as well. But so I'm thinking if I like, it would have to be at a card show. And then I'm putting myself in a position where if I'm going to make a deal at a card show for multiple cards to try to get the price down, and Dameon Pierce is one of them, I'm thinking that's the only way I would do it. But then I'm looking at the cards going, this is a RBBC, right? Like to use another fantasy football term, this is a running back by committee now with Singletary there. So now I'm putting that card back. Like I don't even want it. And of course, everybody knows with me, there is no personal collection value. So I'm putting them back.
It's an uphill battle. Like right now, Dameon Pierce is my running back 41. Out of I'm actually tracking 89 running backs. But I mean, the thing is, he doesn't have elite draft capital behind him. He's super young, but and he does have some explosiveness. But I mean, such an uphill battle in that team environment, and there is going to be a timeshare there with him and Singletary, and you got a team that's clearly going to be behind a lot in games with a rookie quarterback and new coaching. It's just such an uphill battle. There's got like, I'm not going to say no to a $5 rookie ticket auto like you're saying at a card show. Like, yeah, okay, I got one or two, but I'm not going to go out and spend a couple $100 on Dameon Pierce and put a lot of eggs in that basket, thinking that like this is my big play this year. I just don't see the pathway for a huge upside.
Yeah, that's a great point. And if you look at, I think anytime you're thinking about buying a running back, this will be kind of like one of my parting shots on skill position players is if you're thinking about buying a running back, you have to go back and look at Jonathan Taylor. And what I mean by that is look at what his prices were before he had the monster, was it 2021 season, I believe. His 2021 season is when he crushed every category and was like the number one fantasy player, and his card value went up a ton. But look at what it went up from and to. Like it wasn't so like that would be Dameon Pierce's complete maximum like lottery ticket return on any running back, and it's not that much. Like you would have had to buy to get rich on Jonathan Taylor. You would have had to buy in bulk. Huge, and you would have had multiple PSA 10s. Now, granted, his value went up a lot, but it wasn't like how a Jalen Hurts could go up, or how a quarterback basically. So, or even a Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase. So, I think you have to be very careful with running backs, and to Andy's point, they do have to have PC value to you.
Yeah, I mean, Jonathan Taylor, his values like in a percentage format, they went up 200, 300% from 2020 to 2021, but, they have come all the way back down. Now you could get the rookie ticket auto now for $50 when at peak that was $150, $200 card.
Yeah.
After the 2021 season. He was the RB1 heading into last year. The only person that's really been able to maintain that and has gone up since then is Christian McCaffrey. And there's a lot more scarcity baked into Christian McCaffrey's values because 2017 product is an iconic year thanks to Patrick Mahomes and now Christian McCaffrey and guys like Cooper Kupp, that there's a lot more scarcity. So, his rookie ticket auto has maintained that like $150 price point. And the scarcity has definitely helped. And now the 49ers have helped him a lot as well. So, yeah, I mean, those are really important factors to consider, right. and Dameon Pierce just doesn't have anywhere near the athletic profile that guys like, Jonathan Taylor or Saquon Barkley, or Christian McCaffrey have, and those guys are all first round draft picks or early second round.
They're the formula. That's right. They're the formula for running backs, I think. And even then it's tough, right? So good point. All right. Sorry. One more thing on skill position. Look, the stuff's coming in from the audience, so we got to take it. I love this. Card Banker 20. And I want to make a point on this. Card Banker 20 is a new name in the chat. So welcome to the Football Card Strategy Show. We love having you here. He says, if you have to buy a Texan, go to one of the wide receivers, like Andy says. They will be behind a lot, and one of those wide receivers may rack up some yards. So let me throw out a name, and Andy probably knows where I'm going with this, but There's a guy, audience member, who's contributed some content to nooffseason.com. His name is Ryan Painter. He's a great guy. Ryan, if you're listening, shout out. Ryan is high on a guy who I put on my injured reserve on my dynasty team last year in hopes that he would get healthy, mainly for his life situation, but also potentially for his football situation. Now Andy knows who I'm talking about, and that is John Mechie, who also has the Alabama fan base behind him. So to me, there's a deep sleeper formula in a guy like John Mechie based on Card Banker 20. And I know that my guy Ryan Painter is all over the John Mechie play. He's actually working on an article for nooffseason.com on John Mechie probably as we speak. So Andy, what do you think of that call?
I love it because John Mechie is essentially entering into his rookie season. He's got a great storyline, early second-round draft capital there. They did add Robert Woods to the depth chart, but he's an old dusty guy that just had a terrible season last year with the Titans before, leaving the Rams and getting injured with them and stuff. So he's got on the tail end of his career. Nico Collins is another name to definitely look at there, but Nico now heading into his third year. And Nico, it just doesn't – he's not going to have the same hype as John Mechie had. John Mechie is going to be more of a volume receiver, running a lot of routes out of the slot. I mean, this guy did go to Alabama, and you talk about the target competition that he had in Alabama, playing with guys like Waddle and Devonta Smith, and Jamison Williams and stuff. So, I mean, this guy with early second-round draft capital, very very exciting. And I think he's got a great storyline entering a rookie season. So there's a lot of his age score is pretty solid. So I look at him overall as a guy that's going really late in fantasy drafts. You can also pick up his rookie cards for very cheap. And he's a guy that just by sheer volume could end up, as a top 20 wide receiver. CJ Stroud's a very accurate passer. So John Mechie's going to get a lot of work in a lot of different wide receiver formations and a lot of routes out of the slot. So that's going to lead to a lot of volume. And I could definitely see him popping at some point.
We'll talk more about John Mechie at nooffseason.com and his story and why we think he's a good buy and all that stuff. We'll break down his cards. Couple questions came in on defense. So Rocky Empire, I think, was the one who asked, just curious, what, if anything, would it take on the field for a defensive player to get hobby hype? I think maybe he's qualifying the whole DeMar Hamlin thing there with on the field. And so Oh My Shoes says, how do you feel about Sauce Gardner? So is it Sauce Gardner? Is it Micah Parsons? Are there people that we're missing? What does it take to for an individual defensive player to sort of get some hobby love and maybe yield some return on investment? What do you think about that, Andy?
Yeah, well, that's it, man. It's either the biggest ones are Sauce and Micah, and their positions. I think it's either defensive backs or it's edge rushers. People love interceptions and sacks, and you've got a guy as versatile as Micah. And whenever analysts start comparing him to all-time great edge rushers, that's when prices start getting through the roof. You also have to take into consideration he plays for the Cowboys. Sauce plays for the Jets. These are massive market teams that also have historically great players in that same position, Hall of Famers. So, people they feel kind of nostalgic when they buy a Sauce Gardner. It reminds them of Darrelle Revis, So it's those are the guys, like even TJ Watt on the Steelers. You got Joey Porter Jr. entering the Steelers cool. Secondary this year, and his dad played for the Steelers, and the Steelers fan base is rabid. So expect him. Remember that name, because he's a guy that is absolutely going to see some hype, and there's going to be people paying some serious money for his cards coming down the stretch here, especially as a rookie. So, once again, that age score, we're talking first round defensive players making a big impact on a big team. So that's how those defensive players get up. And I've seen Sauce Gardner's values all day long are, generally speaking, are the same as the top offensive players. They're not quite as high as like Garrett Wilson, who got offensive rookie of the year, But if you look at Sauce Gardner and Aiden Hutchinson and compare them to like Chris Olave and Drake London, I mean, they're going to be higher than Drake London. They're going to be right there with like a guy like Chris Olave from last year's first round draft class. They're going to be higher than Jahan Dotson, Treylon Burks. So they're going to be higher than all those other guys. Those were all first round draft picks from last year. And it's because of how well they executed in the storyline and the team that they've landed on and everything.
I'll say this. You just made me think of something. I think it's a great conversation. It's so easy to spread yourself so thin with all the skill position players to try to be correct, to try to make the right call. It's hard to pick the wide receiver. It's hard to pick the running back. It's even hard to pick the quarterback. You got to be really careful with being very, very selective. I think on defense, though, if you were to only buy Sauce or only buy Micah or only just limit yourself to those two guys, you probably could increase your chances of flipping for profit, just because if you think about who's on ESPN, who's being talked about every week it's going to be on the defensive side of the ball, fewer names than on the offensive side of the ball. And so it just kind of equates to more attention, more hype. And to hear you say Sauce Gardner's prices is on par with all those offensive players from the same draft class, that just kind of proves the point. So it's almost like, thank you for everybody in the chat. Thank you, the audience, for bringing up Sauce and defense, because I think you could go make money on only buying Sauce right now. That's another, but I'm saying don't spread yourself too thin on defense. Don't get cute and be like, I love that Andy's dropping the other names, but like, don't get super cute, because the deeper that you go, you just have to say like, there's less people that are interested in that player, because if you're going so deep, you're limiting your market by going deep and having like such a sleeper call. But if you just pick a guy like Sauce and go all in on him, I think you're increasing your chances of making some profit with a guy like that who's going to be talked about every single week. And I mean, look, it's like the Aaron Rodgers effect. As much as I hate Aaron Rodgers, there's the Aaron Rodgers effect in New York right now. So that's another reason to maybe go in on Sauce. But I want to talk real quick about off-season names to watch. I wrote an article at sportscardinvestor.com. So I'm not going to go through this whole thing, but essentially there's top guys, Burrow, Hurts, Lawrence, and I had to throw Aaron Rodgers in there just because I hate him, but I had to throw him in there. Names to watch. We've mentioned some of these guys. I'm going to kind of skip over these guys too, because I don't necessarily think you should be buying them, but they're relevant to talk about in that they move teams and or locked in long-term contracts in terms of Garoppolo, Carr, Smith, Jones, Lamar Jackson. I think some deeper sleepers would be, and I'm curious to Andy's take on this because we're going to hit home a little bit, but the Tampa Bay quarterback situation with Baker and Kyle Trask. How is that going to shake out? Is there a football card sleeper between those two guys, and which direction would you be going in? Are you fading the entire thing, or are you like, what do you think here?
Yeah, I'm fading the entire thing. It's going to be tough. The Bucs go to the Vikings in week 1 in Minnesota. That's pretty much a loss. And then we get we host the Bears in week 2. And I think you could probably pencil the Bears in there for a narrow victory. And then in week 3, we host the Eagles. Not going to be a pretty start to the season. I'm looking at a 1-2 start at best. I think a Baker Mayfield's going to start, and we don't know what kind of football we're going to get out of Baker Mayfield. Is he going to resurrect his career? I'm not a fan of head coach Todd Bowles. Now, I did look at our new offensive coordinator, and I'm a little bit higher on Dave Canales than Byron Leftwich. Mm-hmm. So I think it's interesting. Dave Canales comes from Seattle, and he's credited with assisting Geno Smith in a career resurrection. So there's, I guess, a narrow thread you can draw between how much did he really assist Geno Smith last year in a career resurrection? How much can he actually infuse of that into Baker Mayfield in a career resurrection? I'm more bullish on investing in. I like Rachaad White. I think Rachaad White's going to get a big workload there, and I think a lot of people maybe down on him a little bit after the rookie season. But he did take over the backfield from Leonard Fournette, and I do think that he could take a big step in his second year. I got a couple Kyle Trask cards. I just don't think he's going to start the season with. They may transition to him, but Todd Bowles is on the hot seat. I think this is his final year as a head coach. He's a defensive-minded head coach.
Yeah,
I mean, his whole focus is on dialing up blitz packages and being super aggressive on defense. And he's not a big motivator. He's not a guy to get people fired up in the locker room. Dave Canales coming in is pretty much going to run this offense. So I think you saw Seattle's offense last year was very balanced. It wasn't nearly as run-heavy as we thought, but I think Baker he still goes out on the field and he does his own thing a lot of times. He's very much a guy that likes to be a hero out there and make these crazy plays. So I'd be really sad if we traded Mike Evans. That's obviously a possibility. And my expectations are very low for the Bucs, and I can't get behind buying any Baker Mayfield cards right now. And I think they are going to go down by November.
Okay. So I talk a lot about building your sports card investment portfolio. And what I mean by that is I want you to have maximum 5 or 6 players at any given time that you're looking to move, like to acquire and move out of. Now that can change based on, like, if you're a guy like Chad Gill, you've got 50 or 60, but you're managing that in a way where you know when you're buying whom and when you're going to sell them. And so you're able to kind of scale up to that number. So you're focused on your strategy and executing your strategy. But if you're sort of just getting started, or you're like, to me, I'm only in like year 3 and I still consider myself just getting started. Like I'm into year 3, but I feel like I'm still just getting started in terms of like true management of my sports card flipping portfolio. And so that's why I say 5 or 6 guys. So when I look at football, for me, I have Joe Burrow, Jalen Hurts, Trevor Lawrence, Caleb Williams. And the reason I think it's obvious why I have the first 3, the reason why I have Williams is because I feel like now he's a little bit of a longer term hold, but he's a 2024 guy. Like I'm trying to be my Burrow, Hurts, and Lawrence are to flip in August. My Williams is to hold until for a whole nother year, and then flip him hopefully during like the crescendo of his like number 1 overall draft pickness, right? But then you've got a gap in the portfolio, and the gap is a deep sleeper. So Andy, help pick me a deep sleeper. Now, I want to go super deep because this is really fun. I want to be holding the guy's card when he comes out of nowhere and he either has a breakout week or he gets named the starter on a team that's going to be in contention or overachieving. So tell me if I'm going way too deep here, but I'm looking at 3 names at the end of my article. One is Jameson Williams, because he got suspended for the first 6 games of the season for betting on sports, which I'm sorry, but that's kind of hilarious. Like, how can that not happen? Isn't everyone betting on sports on apps right now? Like, I know that the NFL guys shouldn't be doing this, but to me, that's kind of funny. So he fits the formula in that he's in this up and coming Detroit Lions team. He has not done anything yet, but he has all the talent, and he's in a situation where, like, if he were starting the season, I think we'd be talking about this guy a lot, but because he's not, we're not talking about him. And because we're not talking about him, his prices should be lower, but he's still the same guy, and he's coming back after 6 games. The other 2 guys are Taylor Heineke and Mike White. Now, what has to happen there is an injury. Now, Mike White has Tua in front of him, so now we're all going, there could be an injury there. Mike White's done it before, and he's on a very talented Dolphins team that could compete. So that one makes sense to me. The third one doesn't make as much sense because it's Taylor Heineke and it's the Falcons, but maybe I'm thinking this could be a penny stock. Am I crazy in mentioning these 3 names? I think you've probably mentioned some better names than I have, but what do you think about these 3 guys?
Yeah, I mean, I'm out on Heineke just because of the run heavy offense with the Falcons, and we've seen enough of him. I don't think he's going to drive any type of FOMO or fear of missing out. We've
Yeah.
seen him. I think that window is coming past. Whenever he got that spot start for the Commanders in the playoffs against the Bucks, that was his peak. That was his peak. And then there was a couple games last year where he led them to a couple wins, including the Eagles there on Monday Night Football. So that was kind of like another little peak for him. But yeah, I just don't see him driving enough at his now age, and the draft capital spent on him. I mean, he's a late round guy. Yeah, so I'm out on him because I also think that the Falcons, they're the winner of the NFC South is probably going to have close to a 500 record. Let's put it that way. But I think that's probably going to end up being the Saints, and the Falcons are going to be a close second. But it's just, man, it's going to be tough for them to get enough hype with how good the rest of the AFC teams are, how good the NFC East is. So yeah, I'm kind of out on him. Now, the one guy I will say that I'm big on is Jamison Williams. The first 6-game suspension, but this is a guy that's going to be one of the fastest guys in the NFL, great at the point of catch. I mean, this guy could be a star in the NFL. So, and he's got a perfect role in the Lions offense where Jared Goff, give him time behind an elite offensive line, is going to be aggressive. They get into a lot of shootouts because their defense is not the best. So we'll see how much their defense improves this year. They're absolutely a team that's going to contend. They're probably going to win the NFC North, probably going to be making a pretty solid playoff run this year. So let's see. And Jamison Williams can be a big part of that. And he is a complementary role. He's a guy that they don't have in Amon-Ra St. Brown,
Right.
Or Jahmyr Gibbs or Sam Laporta or these other guys on the roster. There's no more DJ Chark
Yeah,
there.
DJ Chark's gone. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, DJ Chark's gone. So it's it's Jamison Williams outside role to take to go and make those big bomb Randy Moss type plays,
he's a Deshaun Jackson type guy, right?
Like 3 for 89 and 3 touchdowns, kind of highlight reel. And people are going to go nuts for him because he is so young. It's pretty much like his rookie debut with him missing most of the season last year, now suspended for 6 games due to gambling on college football.
Yeah. So Jamison Williams to me is slightly edging out John Mechie only because Mechie's on the Texans, and I think that the winning is definitely part of this formula. I think that while I love them, Mechie's price would have to be significantly low. Williams rookie ticket auto that I showed a picture of a second ago, that's going for around $50, and I feel like that's the right idea. Buying a few of those, hoping that they get up to hopefully they can double or something like that if Williams were to actually do what we think he can do. But Mechie, I feel would have to be more $10 or $15 on his rookie ticket auto for me to buy into that. I don't know if I'm anywhere near accurate on what Mechie's prices are going for, but anyway, thanks for helping me pick a super sleeper there. I appreciate it. You got to weed people out. So you got to say, look, you're crazy on Heineke. I'd fade Mike White. I'd fade Trask and Mayfield. You gotta, because people are thinking about all of these players. So I think it's just as helpful to say,
out of all those guys,
that guy.
Out of all those guys, Paul, I'd say Mike White, just because of how he's flashed with the Jets and how good the Dolphins team now is and how good the weapons are. That's going to really propel Mike White to the level, because we know it's going to be a passing attack, and they're going to spread that offense horizontally to wear the defense out. And you have some of the best skill position players in the league. They now add Devin Achane here. I see Card Banker mentioning Devin Achane, incredible 3rd-round draft pick from the Miami Dolphins there. This guy is a guy that runs sub 4.4 speed, incredibly fast, electric. So he's a guy that Mike McDaniels beat the table for to get. This was a Mike McDaniels pick. So this is exciting for the Dolphins. If anything happens to Tua, fragility, brain injuries, it's going to be Mike White stepping in. He's a guy that I think could, unlike Heineke, With the Dolphins, it's a different situation. It's a different animal.
Yeah.
It's a different division. It's a different offensive attack. There's a different dynamic there, and
he's done it before in that division. He has
yeah.
a Cowboys rookie card, which doesn't hurt him, right? I mean, we're kind of talking ourselves into Mike White here. It depends. It's going to depend on the pricing that you can get Mike White for, but and I think there's an element of scarcity to Mike White, so it might not be super easy to find just because of his, he was a late pick, all that stuff. But he is interesting because the odds of him starting a game this year are super high, at least one game, super high, and that's when you would sell him, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's when you tell them. I'd say from like quarterback perspective, starting quarterbacks perspective, there's a couple plays I want to mention real quick before we get out of here. One of them is Trevor Lawrence, but it's not what you think because Trevor Lawrence's rare cards, his autograph cards are at a super premium, right? He's got a lot of hype. He's in my top 10. He's probably even in my top 5. But if you go and look at the gem rate of his base donors, the gem rate, so the rate of which raw cards convert into a PSA 10 on his optics and his prism are below 30%. It's very bad. It's very hard to get.
They're below 15%. I just looked at that the other day. It's really low.
It's crazy low. It's crazy low. And I know new numbers are coming back all the time. So below 15%, and it's insane. But if you go and look at the PSA 10 rate of his base Donruss rated rookie converting from a raw to a PSA 10, it's above 50%. It's the
50.
highest of all. And you can buy that card routinely in auction, buy it now because people think it's so common for $10. And then, but the PSA 10 is selling for close to $100.
Yeah.
So there's a big difference there. And now with the current grading fees, you could also look at the base Donruss portrait rated rookies in a Clemson jersey, but it's got the Jaguars logo. It's got the rated rookie logo. That's got a very high gem rate as well. It's a play to get those cards raw for around $10, get them graded for $19 through PSA, their bulk submission, and get those back. And now all of a sudden you make a double up. So that would be my play on Trevor Lawrence. The other one is actually Kenny Pickett, and this is because of the starting schedule to the season. Now there's a little bit of a premium on Kenny Pickett, but I just shopped his values last night, and I feel that they're very favorable right now. I don't know how they're going to change coming into the season, but there's a lot of hype on the guys from 2020, 2021, and then some of the other guys from 2022 and the rookies this year, that Pickett is actually, I think, falling a little bit undervalued right now, and I like their opening schedule. They play the 49ers with we don't know who yet at quarterback, but they play at home. We know the Steelers play very well at home. You got to have a healthy TJ Watt. You have an improved Steelers defense, and now Kenny Pickett entering a second year with improved offensive line. Still great weapons and the whole 9 yards. So I love, and the Steelers go crazy for players. So if they get off to a hot start at home week 1 against the 49ers, I could see them winning that game. And then in week 2, they play at home again against the Browns. Another game that I think is close, but I could see them winning this game. Another game at home against the Browns, especially if Deshaun Watson's still rusty, right? And then week 3, they go to the Raiders, Las Vegas. They go to Las Vegas week 3, which I think may even be a late afternoon or a primetime game, and they win, and now all of a sudden the Steelers are 3-0. Kenny Pickett's values, I mean, they could absolutely go up to what we see for some of the elite guys. So I think that's an interesting play, and he's not in the top 10 list. He's kind of just outside that, but I think that there's some interesting upside buying in right now, and hoping that he can get off to that 3-0 start.
I love that. It's super tempting to go in all of these different directions. And I think, even though what I said earlier about you needing to stay focused on like 5 or 6 guys in your portfolio and know why they're there, know why you're buying them, when you're buying them, and know why you're selling them when you're selling them. I do think that there's a little bit of room for calling some audibles, right? Like Kenny Pickett. If you see a deal on a Kenny Pickett card, now you have a reason based on what Andy just said to go ahead and pick that card up, because as long as you know why you're getting it and when you're going to sell it, I still think it's part of a good football card strategy. So, and I love what you said about the Trevor Lawrence cards. I, funny enough, had done like the exact same research that you did, and I can echo everything you said there. I love that call. And a year ago at the National, I bought a bunch of those base Donruss Trevor Lawrence in dollar boxes, and I got a bunch of them for free almost, because they clearly were PSA 10s. Like you could just tell, and they were raw, but like I could just tell they were PSA 10s. And so to know the gem rate on that card is over 50% does not surprise me. You can make those plays all day, especially with the grading fee now being $19 a card. Card Banker 20 brought it strong today, as did Rocky Empire, Shoes, Chad, Greeny Green. Thanks to everybody who contributed in the audience. He says, as a reference point, he picked up Nico Collins' rookie ticket out of 99 for $11. So those kinds of plays, we didn't spend too much time in today's show talking about those kinds of plays, but maybe we'll come back in a few weeks and talk maybe more about like some, picking up the sleeper guys for super cheap on a big card, because that's a whole other strategy. So thanks for sharing that. If you want more Andy, there's a bunch of different ways to get it, but I would highly recommend you go to patreon.com/footballcards, because that's where the Football Card Quest is basically offering all of the membership levels. And you love Andy, you want to get more Andy, I would do it there, because you're going to get the most access you could possibly get to the man. And he's going to help you make money flipping football cards and have fun. He's going to help, like, engaging more with Andy is going to help you win your fantasy football leagues, have fun collecting cool football cards, and make money flipping football cards, which is, that's all anyone could ever ask for. It's the most fun I ever have talking to Andy. So thanks for being on the show today, man. Anything else you want to add?
No, I appreciate you, Paul. I appreciate you, Paul. I had a lot of fun. Yeah, there's a lot more skill position depth that we could dive into.
We could do like a 24-hour football card strategy show-a-thon for sure. And like still not get to it all, because I know your level of passion for NFL and all things football. So appreciate you being on the show. Really appreciate your time. Everybody check out Andy at Football Card Quest. And don't forget, go to nooffseason.com and get a free 30-day trial, because we're doing a lot of cool stuff there to help you make money flipping cards. And everybody, thanks so much for watching and listening. I'm Paul Hickey with nooffseason.com. For Andy Cason at Football Card Quest, have a great day.